I recently read Getting to Yes, Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In by authors Roger Fisher and William Ury. Most negotiations feel like trench warfare. Two parties take a position, dig in, and battle it out. Let's say you're thinking of joining a startup, and you insist on receiving 5% equity in the company. But the founder only wants to give you 1%. So you go back and forth for days, trying not to give in. Your ego becomes identified with your 5% position. So you cling to your position and try not to give in because you don't want to look weak. Then, after a long, drawn-out negotiation process, you agree to meet in the middle. But neither party is really satisfied. Plus, the battle has fractured the relationship between you and the founder, which makes it difficult to work together. As the authors of Getting to Yes say, standard strategies for negotiation often leave people dissatisfied, worn out, or alienated, and frequently all three. In order to avoid long and bitter negotiations and preserve the relationships between you and the people you negotiate with, it's imperative that you learn and practice a set of negotiating principles from the classic negotiating guide, Getting to Yes. First, try on their point of view. Second, invent win-win agreements. And third, insist on using objective criteria. Your goal at the start of every negotiation is to transform the negotiation from a heated face-to-face battle to a side-by-side activity where both parties work together to solve the problem and create a win-win solution. Because when people feel involved in the creation of a solution, they're more likely to accept that solution. But this is hard, because as the authors put it, the people you negotiate with have egos that are easily threatened. They see the world from their own personal vantage point, and they frequently confuse their perceptions with reality. In the book, the authors provide a great example of this. When a negotiation between a tenant and a landlord breaks down, the tenant thinks, the rent ought to be low because the neighborhood is run down. While the landlord thinks, we landlords should raise rents to improve the quality of the neighborhood. When the tenant thinks, I always pay my rent whenever she asks for it. The landlord thinks, he never pays the rent until I ask for it. When the tenant thinks, she is cold and distant. She never asks me how things are. The landlord is thinking, I'm a considerate person who never intrudes on a tenant's privacy. If you can take time to understand the contrasting points of view in a negotiation, the person you're negotiating with will be less angry, offended, and hostile, and the more likely they are to join you in a side-by-side effort to create a mutually beneficial agreement. So before you enter negotiation, try on their point of view. Take time to go for a walk in the other person's shoes by imagining how they may have arrived at their current position and why they might be feeling pressure to hold their position. Maybe their boss is pressuring them to not compromise, or maybe their wife is pressuring them to get the best deal possible. Once you think you have a good understanding of their perspective, say, let me see if I can summarize your position. You want A because of B, or you want X because of Y. If you're an office manager in a salary negotiation, you might summarize your employee's position by saying, let me see if I can summarize your position. You want to receive a higher raise than the standard 5% annual raise because you've hit all your annual targets and you feel like you're taking on harder projects than most people in the office. If you try to explain the other person's position in a way that satisfies them, you'll either notice that what they want is more reasonable and fair than you first thought, or as you explain it, they start to see that it doesn't make as much sense as they first thought. Hearing their position relayed back to them is almost like hearing their first draft read out loud and noticing the typos and grammatical errors. With some back and forth clarification, the two of you will reach a point where you'll be more inclined to work together to resolve any confusion and find a mutually beneficial solution rather than cling to your original positions. Negotiation principle number 2. Invent a win-win agreement. A difference in perspective is the source of conflict, but it's also the source of many win-win agreements. I'll explain using a simple example. Say there's a lemon sitting on the kitchen counter and my wife and I are negotiating over who should get it. If we have the awareness to step back and ask, wait, what do you need this for? She might say, I need this for my recipe. And I might say, I need it because I want to add lemon juice to my water. At that moment, we realize that we can both get what we want. I only need the lemon juice, and she only needs the lemon zest for her recipe. So I zest the lemon, give her the zest, then juice the lemon, and we're both happy. As the authors say, a satisfactory agreement is made possible because each side wants different things. If you're starting a business and you care less about how much of the company you own and more about keeping your expenses low so the company will be successful, You'll quickly reach an agreement with an employee who thinks your business will be successful and cares more about equity than salary at this point. If a general manager of a professional basketball team is negotiating a new salary with his star player, and the GM only wants to offer $10 million a year, but the player wants $13 million a year, both parties can reach an agreement based on different beliefs. If the player believes he's going to have a breakout year and the team is poised for a playoff run, but the owner is more conservative, the GM can offer a contract with the base salary of $10 million and a bonus of $3 million for every playoff series the team wins. That way, in the off chance the team does well, the extra revenue they make in the playoffs can offset the bonus. By leveraging the differences in perspective, both parties reached an agreement they were satisfied with. So to find an opportunity to create a win-win agreement, focus on how your interests, values, and beliefs differ from the person you're negotiating with. Negotiation principle number 3. Insist on using objective criteria. If you can't reach a mutually beneficial agreement, act like a judge and insist on using objective criteria to decide your case. Let's say you got in a car accident and totaled your car, and an insurance adjuster only wants to give you $5,000 for your car, but you know it'll cost you at least $9,000 to buy a similar car. After one conversation with the insurance adjuster, you can tell he's trying to bully you and isn't interested in finding a mutually beneficial agreement. So you insist on using objective criteria to settle the disagreement. You find a fair market value for your car by finding 3 comparable cars that just sold in the used car market, by getting the standard Blue Book value for your car's model and year, and by finding out what a court might award you by talking to a lawyer or looking up public settlements. Then the next time you talk to the insurance adjuster, say, I understand if you're bound to the company policy, but based on these examples, I believe I'm entitled to at least $8,500. Why don't you look over these documents and we'll talk sometime next week? Whatever he comes back with, insist on using objective criteria. Get in the habit of asking, what's your basis, or how did you arrive at that figure? By insisting on using objective criteria to decide a negotiation, you let the other party know that they can't win simply by pressuring you, and that the only way that you'll reach an agreement is by agreeing on a standard with which you can settle the dispute. So if your negotiation reaches an impasse and you're feeling pressured to give in, get in the habit of asking, how would a court decide this? Research standards, existing precedent, cultural norms, fair market value, or a neutral third-party expert that you'll both allow to settle the dispute. So the next time you enter a negotiation, prevent that negotiation from turning into a positional battle that resembles trench warfare and damages your relationship. And instead, try on their point of view, and then invite them to work with you to resolve the conflict. Then try to invent a mutually beneficial agreement by focusing on your differences. And lastly, insist on using objective criteria, like existing precedent, professional standards, or cultural norms, to reach a fair agreement. That was the core message that I gathered from Getting to Yes by authors Roger Fisher and William Ury. If you want your negotiations to go smoothly, I highly recommend reading this book. If you would like a one-page PDF summary of insights that I gathered from this book, just click the link below and I'd be happy to email it to you. If you already subscribe to the free Productivity Game email newsletter, this PDF is sitting in your inbox. If you like this video, please share it. As always, thanks for watching, and have yourself a productive week.